Greetings and welcome to the AIM ImmunoTech Conference. It is now my pleasure to introduce your host, CEO Tom Equels. Thank you, Mr. Equels. You may begin.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tom Equels, the CEO of AIM ImmunoTech. First of all, I want to thank you for your interest in our company and our products and the work we're doing. And it's especially important in these troubled times that we're in to have support and understanding of the advances that we're trying to make, not just in immunology generally, but also in COVID-19. We're going to address today an update of our COVID-19 work, our ME/CFS, chronic fatigue syndrome work, and our work with COVID-19 induced chronic fatigue, and especially our core work that we've done over the past 2 years in establishing numerous phase 2 and phase 1/2 clinical trials in immuno-oncology. I'm also going to go into an update on our Alferon manufacturing. Alferon is our product, which is a natural alpha interferon, and it's FDA-approved. And we're working on getting an FDA-approved high-volume, low-cost manufacturing process in place. So in going forward, we're a public company, and I realize many of you are potential investors, so please look at the forward-looking statement and recognize that much of what we're going to be talking about relates to our plans and the potential for our drugs, Alferon and Ampligen. And we also ask you to look at our Forms 10K, 10Q, and the various disclosures and disclaimers that are contained in those documents so that as we go through this, you're able to recognize that some of these things are not things that we can guarantee, but that we're working on and we trust will have potential. That having been said, I'm going to move into a discussion that gives you an overview of who we are and what we're doing. I'm on slide 3, and as slide 3 says, we're an immuno-pharma company focused on research and development of therapeutics, and those therapeutics are designed to address viral diseases, cancers, and certain immune deficiency orders such as chronic fatigue syndrome. Now, both of our drugs, Ampligen and Alferon, are immunological therapies that we're trying to develop in important areas where there are unmet medical needs. I'm going to spend a lot of our time on Ampligen during this session. And Ampligen is a drug which is in numerous clinical trials in oncology. It is moving forward in COVID-19. It is late stage in terms of research and development in the United States in ME/CFS, known as chronic fatigue syndrome. And it is approved, it's in fact the only drug approved anywhere in the world for chronic fatigue syndrome. It was approved by Argentina's FDA called NMET. Now, we are seeking to move forward with clinical trials in COVID-19. Specifically, we have an FDA authorization for a clinical trial at Roswell Park Comprehensive Cancer Center treating early onset COVID-19 in patients that have cancer. Cancer patients are a very high-risk group. We have a chronic fatigue trial called AMP-511. It's a compassionate use trial that's underway in 2 clinics in the United States, one in Nevada and one in North Carolina. And we're working to expand those trials to allow us to evaluate Ampligen for COVID-19 induced chronic fatigue. I call it COVID survivor syndrome. You may hear it as COVID long haulers or COVID long term, but as you'll see later in the presentation, it's a real problem that we're facing right now, and it's only going to get worse. And we're seeking FDA authorization. We will be seeking FDA authorization for a clinical trial of Ampligen as a prophylaxis for COVID-19, an intranasal prophylaxis. We have numerous oncology clinical trials underway, and these are in cancers that are basically lethal, unmet medical needs, such as advanced recurrent ovarian cancer, triple-negative breast cancer. We've got grants where Ampligen is going to be part of the testing in brain metastatic breast cancer and other lethal malignancies. So there's a lot going on with Ampligen and AIM, and I'm going to take a few minutes to go over a few of the highlights. Now, if you go to slide 4, you'll see that there are a number of points here that I just touched on. I think if you look, you can recognize that these activities have the potential, if we're successful in any one of these clinical trials, let alone in the majority of these clinical trials, because they're in different areas and multiple malignancies in oncology, to create tremendous stockholder value long term. So we believe we're providing our investors with a lot of shots on goal, a lot of opportunities for success, and we've been, I think if you look historically over the past 3 years, we've been diligently attacking milestones that we've set and been successful in achieving many of those milestones. At the bottom of slide 4, you'll see a note regarding our balance sheet. Now, the last audited balance sheet was as of March 31st, 2020, but we had a significant cash balance, and our cash position was good as of that point, in the sense that it gave us probably 3 years of operating cash, and we're still in a very good position. I move now to slide 5. Slide 5 is a pipeline chart for oncology, and also addresses COVID-19 and CFS. And I'm not going to go through this line by line, but when you get a chance, take a look. You'll see that we're working in areas where there are critical needs and very large markets. For example, the work that we're doing, Ampligen plus Keytruda in ovarian cancer and triple-negative breast cancer. These are unmet medical needs with malignancies that are almost certainly lethal. And if we're able to demonstrate high levels of synergy with Keytruda in those trials, we open up an extremely large market, which I believe creates long-term value. There are other trials that are in the works or underway, some of which have FDA authorizations already, but haven't yet begun recruiting, but we're moving as quickly as possible with all these trials. The COVID-19 trials are getting some preference over the oncology trials that haven't started for 2 reasons. One, the urgency in COVID-19 is great, but 2, cancer is particularly devastating for cancer, COVID-19 is particularly devastating for cancer patients, so a lot of the cancer centers are also addressing pandemic-related issues, which slows down their commencement of new studies. But we're moving forward on all these fronts, and doing so, I think, making excellent progress. Now, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about Ampligen as a broad-spectrum antiviral. You'll note in our on our website, there's a slide deck that Ampligen as an antiviral, which goes into a lot more detail than this, but basically, we found in vitro as well as animal experiments that Ampligen demonstrates a tremendous antiviral activity, not just against certain particular viruses, but against a broad spectrum of viruses, such as herpes, alpha, corona, filoviruses, the viruses that cause influenza. These are all viruses that have been shown to respond to the effect of Ampligen. For example, in animal experiments utilizing mice, Ampligen demonstrated 100% protective survival against SARS-CoV-1. That's a very close cousin of SARS-CoV-2, which causes COVID-19. The Ebola virus, Western equine encephalitis virus, and herpes virus. Now, this 100% survival is significant because these viruses are very different. But Ampligen, unlike your typical antiviral, is not based as a therapy on the structure of a particular virus. It's based upon the operation of the innate immune system. Ampligen generates cascades of interferon, alpha, beta, gamma interferon, which as a consequence it has an effect on the proteins and messenger RNA essential for viral replication, and that's how Ampligen is able to have an impact in multiple types of viruses. So it becomes important as a potential for this pandemic and other pandemics. I move now to slide 7. You'll see on slide 7 there are 2 links to 2 studies. These studies are well worth reading. They're a little technical, but they talk about National Institute of Health contract studies utilizing Ampligen and comparing Ampligen to other antivirals in a challenge related to the SARS-CoV-1 outbreak. Now, Ampligen turned out head and shoulders above any of the comparators, and significantly, in 2006, it was the only antiviral to reduce the viral lung levels to below detectable limits. And in the 2009 study, which was a study testing mortality and survival, Ampligen was the only antiviral that conferred 100% protective survival. So you know, the impact of Ampligen in these animal experiments that preceded COVID-19 are very important. The fact that these particular animal experiments you see on slide 7 were done in SARS-CoV-1, the SARS epidemic virus, which is an extremely close cousin to SARS-CoV-2, which is causing COVID-19, it gave us a great impetus to move forward as an antiviral for COVID-19. Move now to slide 8. The discussion of our research for Ampligen as a protective prophylactic and early onset treatment. I mentioned the work that the FDA has authorized us to do at Roswell as an early onset therapy for COVID-19 infected cancer patients, and we expect that to be going into it's authorized. We have a clinical trial agreement with Roswell, and we hope to move into the clinic treating patients soon. And the prophylaxis is basically a drug that prevents infection. Now, why are these 2 things important? I mean, they seem to be niche applications in COVID-19, but until there's a vaccine, until there is general immunity in a society, these are extremely important niches for purposes of public health management. Think about it like this. If you know, God forbid, one of your family members becomes infected, you're all living in the same house. Well, the likelihood is that without a prophylaxis that helps you to prevent infection, your chances of the chances of the other persons in that family becoming infected are very high. Think about it if you're going to be on an airplane with 100 people, you know, leaving Miami for New York. there's a good chance somebody on that airplane has COVID-19. Probably many people on that airplane, just from a statistical, shot, have COVID-19. And because it's a closed environment and an environment where air is recirculated and an environment where you're in close proximity to other people, your chances of getting infected become high. If you had a prophylaxis to add to social distancing and mask wearing and these other protective measures, that prophylaxis could be very important in preventing the spread of the disease. Similarly, on a cruise ship, you have an outbreak on a cruise ship of COVID-19, 10 people have it. Well, if you don't have a prophylaxis to give the other people to protect them, it'll be like the Diamond Princess. You go from 10 people to 700 people, several hundred people, in a very short period of time. So seeing how prophylaxis works as a part of the public health policy to blunt the spread of the disease is fairly easy. Early onset therapeutics are also very important, because if you have early onset therapeutics, you have the ability, when people test positive and have symptoms, to help them address those symptoms and alleviate those symptoms. And it's especially important if we're able to demonstrate, as we're trying to do with cancer patients, where the cancer patients with COVID-19 have a 5 to 7 times greater chance of severe symptoms and death, that an early onset therapeutic help them to keep the symptoms manageable and avoid mortality. Now, I move now to slide 9. This is a discussion about the clinical trial that we're hoping to start in the near future at Roswell, that's been authorized by the FDA, that we've signed a clinical trial agreement on, all of which is the subject of various press releases. I've explained the essence of this, but if you want to read about it in detail, I suggest you click on the link on slide 9 to clinicaltrials.gov. That'll go into the clinical trial itself, some elements of protocol, and use that as a resource. And it's the person that's in charge of it is Dr. Bram Siegel. There's a link to him, so you can see he's very, very well qualified for this undertaking. I move now to slide 10. This addresses some of our additional advancements in COVID-19. We filed several provisional utility patent applications in order to protect and preserve our place in line and priority with regard to patents, and these would be patents that have international reach under the PCT. Now, one of those that was relatively recent was in June, and there's a press release that relates to it, regarding the COVID-19 induced chronic fatigue, what I described earlier as COVID survivor syndrome. And in addition, recently we signed a material transfer and research agreement with 2 very prestigious parties in Japan, Japan's National Institute of Infectious Disease, the government arm very similar to that that's run by Dr. Fauci here in the United States, and Shionogi, which is a leading global pharmaceutical company and one of the top pharma companies in Japan. Now, they're going to be testing Ampligen as a potential vaccine adjuvant for COVID-19. A part of that agreement, as it was stated in the press release, is that from this point forward, we'll be supplying the Ampligen, and when they're ready to announce the results of their testing and their progress, they will. So I can't provide much more insight into that, but this is a top government research group and the top pharma company in Japan, so we're very excited about participating with them in this process. And finally, we've been doing work with S'more Technologies, one of the world's largest vaping device manufacturers, and we believe we're making steady progress working with them as they work to develop a portable device that would deliver a drug like Ampligen deep into the lungs to create an innovation in inhalation therapy and allow Ampligen in the lungs to create, we believe, what would be a systemic therapeutic response for COVID-19. Now, I move now to slide 11, which addresses chronic fatigue syndrome. With regard to chronic fatigue syndrome, we are really the only therapy anywhere in the world that is late stage in the United States and approved in another country. Now, chronic fatigue syndrome is a disease, it's a medical disorder, and it's a disorder of the immune system. Ampligen has been doing research and clinical trials, phase 1, 2, and 3 clinical trials in chronic fatigue syndrome, but we've been burdened by a misunderstanding that, and to some extent this was in the medical community years ago, a belief that chronic fatigue syndrome was a psychological disorder. Over the past 3 years, that has been debunked completely. Every paper from major journals throughout the United States and the world, make it clear that this is a medical disorder rooted in the immune system. And now it starts to make sense why Ampligen in these clinical trials was demonstrating efficacy, because Ampligen is a toll-like receptor 3 agonist. All it does is stimulate and modulate the immune system. I move now to slide 12. The work that we've done in chronic fatigue becomes also important in understanding, where we're going to go in COVID-19. On slide 12, you'll see that we received the approval from Argentina. We're in the process of trying to get the commercial launch up and running. That required export licenses from the FDA to export to Argentina, and we had to get an import license from Argentina to import. And now they're doing testing. We've shipped drug. Now they're doing testing to assure that the drug that we've shipped is the same as the drug that they approved. And also the data, of the phase 3 that we conducted in the United States established a 39% Ampligen response rate improvement versus 23% in the placebo. A significant effect. So we're working very hard in chronic fatigue, but you may ask, well, why is that an issue now? And the reason it's an issue now is the emergence of what I call COVID survival syndrome, but it's also called COVID long haul, COVID long term, or COVID-induced chronic fatigue. Now, we know that chronic fatigue cases generally have a tie to viral insult. Many of the people that have the traditional chronic fatigue syndrome relate that it began with a respiratory viral infection, somewhat like the flu. Now, it doesn't stop there, because, with this COVID-19 outbreak, it's not just, it might be a problem. There was actually, after the SARS outbreak in China and Hong Kong in 2002, 2003, there was a study done 2 years later of survivors. 40% of those survivors from a Hong Kong hospital complained of chronic fatigue-like symptoms. 27% met the United States CDC standards for chronic fatigue syndrome. So SARS survivors were suffering from chronic fatigue-like syndrome symptoms. We believe that same thing may occur in COVID-19, and we're preparing to address that by trying to formulate a mechanism for clinical trials in the near future. In immuno-oncology, you'll note on our website we've had numerous slide decks outlining our progress in immuno-oncology. We've steadily moved forward with our clinical trials that are based upon Ampligen's apparent ability to convert cold tumors into hot tumors. If you get a chance, go over slides 15 and 16 in some detail, and you'll see that the object of these clinical trials in many instances is to prove just that point, that Ampligen alters the ratio between Treg and T effector cells, dropping the level of suppressor T cells, heightening the level of the T effector cells, and creating an opportunity for drugs like Keytruda or other checkpoint blockade therapies to finally be able to identify these tumors as they change from cold to hot and kill the tumor. Now, there are numerous clinical trials that are going on. For the most part, these clinical trials are all funded by various governmental grants like National Cancer Institute or Department of Defense, or industry grants like Merck grants. A little bit about some of the recent grants on slide 19. The National Cancer Institute awarded $14.5 million to Roswell Park to do an investigator-sponsored trial studying, in large part, the effect of Ampligen, which is a lead component of what's called chemokine modulation therapy in melanoma, colorectal, and ovarian cancer. Similarly, tests are being contemplated pursuant to a $15 million aggregate grant, half to Roswell, half to Moffitt, looking to find a therapy for the horrible unmet medical need in brain metastatic breast cancer. Now, I believe you can see that all these things in oncology that we're doing in the United States, any one of which, and certainly all of them, if we're successful, create tremendous value, I believe. We also have finished up a standalone program in Holland, treating over 30 subjects at Erasmus University using Ampligen against advanced pancreatic cancer. We're waiting for the final report on that, but we've been advised that due to the pandemic that report will be somewhat delayed. And we're looking forward to the publication of those data. Now, if we move to slide 21, I want to talk to you a little bit about our FDA-approved and Argentina-approved product, Alferon N Injection. Alferon N is the only FDA-approved natural alpha interferon. It's approved for certain refractory or recurrent external genital warts, with reimbursement for all approved by major insurers for refractory patients. It's been approved by Argentina for all refractory patients. Basically, when you hear about interferon, you think, well, that's a market with where there's a lot of therapies. But the difference is that all the therapies, alpha interferons in the United States that are approved are recombinant or synthetic. And many of those have neutralizing antibodies, which makes them ineffective and creates potential intolerable side effects. The only replacement possible when you have these neutralizing antibodies is a drug like Alferon, which is, again, the only FDA-approved natural alpha interferon. So Alferon utilizes, it's a biological drug, utilizes leukocytes to tease out of those leukocytes the same interferon that each and every one of us produces to fight viruses, for protection against tumors every day. So it has a role to play, we believe, and now that we have the financial ability to do so, we're moving forward on finalizing what we hope to be a high-tech, high-volume, low-cost manufacturing process that we can get approved by the FDA so that we can do a commercial launch. The drug was originally approved based upon a manual manufacturing process, so we have to replicate the manufacture of that drug that was done in test tubes and flasks. But it's not the same kind of an approval process for a new drug. You simply have to show that you're able to manufacture at the high volume with GMP conditions the same drug in a safe and regulatory compatible manner. Now, I'd like to move now to slide 22. That's the Alferon development pipeline, which is sort of speaks for itself. And I'm going to move to slide 23. This talks a little bit about our patent estate. And one of the things that we've been very aggressive about over the past few years is not only trying to protect what we've got, but create new utility and manufacturing related patents that extend our rights to utilize these drugs well into the future. Now, I move now to slide 24, just a little bit about our management team there. You can read that at your leisure. I'm the first one on the list, and we get to slide 25. When you get a chance, this is something that probably is easier to sit down and study again at your leisure. But this is year-to-date stock activity from the last day of December up through the last day of July. And I think as we've accomplished milestones, we've seen a steady response by the market to our successes. Slide 26 provides some financial information. We're coming up on our next Q. We can only disclose financial information based on audited information. So this is the information as of the last quarter, but we've been very good about protecting our cash position, making sure that we have a cash runway where we can move forward and accomplish these clinical studies that are underway and have an opportunity to reap the benefits for our stockholders if we're successful. Now, slide 27 goes into our general information, ticker symbol, market cap, cash equivalents as of the end of the quarter, that type of thing. Now, the next few slides, 28 on, are scholarly articles, peer-reviewed medical articles that vouch for the science behind a lot of the things that I've been talking about. For those of you that have an interest in that kind of detailed information, it's here for you, easy to locate, so you can read it. Somewhat complicated, a few of these articles, but they'll give you an idea of what it is that causes us to be so excited and enthusiastic about the potential for Ampligen as an antiviral and as an oncology drug. Now, at this time, I'm going to see, let's see how much time we have left here. I'm going to try and answer a few questions.
Thanks, Tom. Due to limited timing, we will take one question. We've had a number of questions come in regarding Japan. So can you please give an update on that?
Sure. I think probably the best place to go. I'm looking at we did have a lot of questions regarding Japan that are very similar. The best place to go would be our last press release, which relates to the tri-party agreement, which was formally entered into between AIM ImmunoTech, Shionogi Pharma, and Japan's National Institute of Infectious Disease. That agreement is a compelling piece of progress in our relationship in Japan. But one of the components of the agreement is that data from the work that they're doing in Japan is going to be kept confidential until Shionogi and Japan's NIAID determine to announce the results of the data, and that may be in conjunction with the vaccine product that they're working on. That's also mentioned in the press release in the agreement. So we believe we're making good progress in Japan, but once Shionogi and entered the picture and we formalized the agreement with NIAID, the National Institute of Infectious Disease, and Shionogi, then all the progress becomes confidential until they release information. We have time for any other questions. I saw a question about Alferon LDO.
Sure, we'll take that as our last question. So any thoughts on Alferon LDO use?
Yes. Alferon is, as I mentioned, an injectable FDA-approved natural alpha interferon. There's a concept of utilizing Alferon in a low-dose oral form. Right now, we have to solve the manufacturing issues to get high-volume, low-cost production of Alferon. Once we've done that, not only will we move to as quickly as possible to do a commercial launch of the FDA-approved version of Alferon, the injectable, but we will also then accelerate the clinical work with the low-dose oral version, which could in and of itself have a tremendous potential as a prophylactic.
Great, thank you. Do you have any closing remarks?
I do. I want to thank everybody for your interest in AIM ImmunoTech, and I can't promise that we'll be successful in all these things that we're doing, but I can promise you that we're working at 110% to create success for this company and to achieve these goals that we've set before us. And again, thank you very much for your interest.